When the McLaren F1 team counts on speed, they count on Dropbox Dash. Dash finds what you need fast across all your work apps so you can focus on what matters. Learn more at dropbox.com/McLaren F1.
This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injury is an additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
Pie in the Sky Media. This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence throughout. Listener discretion is advised. August 6th, 2024. A SWAT team surrounds a home in Griffin, Georgia. Roughly 35 miles from Atlanta, they had a warrant in hand for the arrest of Christopher Wolfenbarger. It had been a long time coming. Christopher had been a person of interest in his wife Melissa's murder since 1999. They knew Christopher was home when they went inside, but he was nowhere to be found. How did they know he was home? Well, they were tracking the GPS on his phone, which led them to a crevice between a kitchen counter and a sort of built-in wine rack. The body cam footage of a SWAT team member captures a tense situation as the officer points his service weapon into the void, where they knew somewhere behind the counters lay their quarry. This officer motions to the SWAT team members as he mouths that the suspect was down in there, hiding. But there are few things more dangerous than a suspect who won't come out when called by armed officers, but instead hides. They have no idea what he was capable of.
He's in here. On the other side. You're going to see him. Talk to him. Talk to him. Chris, come out with your hands up, dude. Come out now. Partner, come out now or you're going to get yourself fucking shot.
It would take more than 30 minutes, but eventually Christopher Wolfenbarger comes out of his hiding space and is taken into custody without incident. But it wasn't a good look for him. Were these the actions of an innocent man?
Inside of that. Inside of that. Yes, you're circle being inside. Yeah. He's kind of hunched over like this.
The arrest was announced at a press conference the following day.
Good afternoon. My name is Lieutenant Andrew Smith, Atlanta Homicide Commander. Thank you for joining us today. We're here to talk about the 1999 murder of Melissa Wolfenbarger. Together with us today is the mother and sister of Melissa, and we just can't express how happy we are that you are joining us today for this moment. So specifically on August 6th, yesterday, we took into custody Christopher Wolfenbarger, and he was charged with the murder of Melissa Wolfenbarger.
The detective would say they believed the motive of the crime was domestic violence. But when questioned about what led to Christopher's arrest more than 20 years after his wife's disappearance and murder, the detective vaguely alluded to DNA and a successful re-interviewing of witnesses.
Certain parts of the evidence, I want to protect the integrity of the case going forward, so I can't disclose certain evidence. But we look at everything when it comes to cold case, especially DNA. We look at witnesses that need to be re-interviewed, and it's a collective effort to build a cold case. So I don't want to point to any specific piece of evidence because it's important moving forward.
Melissa was just 21 years old and the mother of 2 small children when she went missing. Her older sister, Tina, spoke at the press conference, saying their family had never wavered in their belief that Christopher had murdered Melissa.
My mom has said, I don't know how many times, when she first met him, there was just evil in his eyes. That is so true. If you look at a picture of Charlie Manson, you see the same thing. And it's the same thing with Christopher. And I saw his mugshot earlier, and it's still there. It's been a long wait, 25 years. But finally, hopefully, we will get justice for Melissa. She didn't deserve what she got. And I hope anybody who's in a domestic violence situation, please get out. Don't take it. Because it could easily be you. It could be your sister. It could be your mother. Make sure they get away.
And Norma Patton, Melissa's mother, expressed her gratitude that her daughter's husband, Christopher, was finally behind bars.
He's in custody. And now we just need to get over the last hurdle and get him convicted.
Now, at this point, you might be thinking, DNA, a history of domestic violence, potentially an open and shut case. But one thing that wasn't being discussed at this press conference was the reason Norma's husband, Carl Patton, who was Melissa's father, wasn't at the press conference that day, but would absolutely be discussed in detail with Norma during Christopher Wolfenbarger's upcoming trial.
Now, you've mentioned that your husband, Carl Patton, eventually confessed to murdering 5 people. Is that correct?
Yes.
Not only was Melissa's father a convicted serial killer, but her mother, Norma, helped cover up his crimes.
For some of the murders, you were not involved. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But you overheard Carl making plans for them.
Yes.
And you testified about this under oath in 2003.
Correct.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Criminal Mischief with Carolyn and Brandon. You're listening to episode 147, The Sins of the Father. So I want to start by rewinding the clock with Melissa's early life. She was born in 1977. Her sister Tina was 7 years older, and both girls were the daughters of Carl and Norma Patton. At Christopher's trial, which began on August 18th, 2025, Melissa's childhood friend, Wendy, who was also a neighbor, testified.
I remember telling me that, looking back, you would consider that she had been abused and neglected.
Yes.
Wendy also described the sisters being locked in their rooms daily from ages 7 to 12. And these locks were the kind that were on the outside of the door.
Do you remember describing a time to me when she would visit her almost every day?
Every weekend, yeah.
And that you would be locked in the room with her?
Yeah, growing up.
And did you tell me that the door locks would be reversed on her door? So that the lock was on the outside?
It was.
Do you remember telling me that she was locked that way every day, all day?
Yes.
Thank you.
So was her sister.
Wendy shared how Melissa was bullied because she said her home had a strong odor that clung to her clothing. And because of it, she was horribly picked on.
You said that she was weak.
She was.
You said that she was submissive.
She was.
You describe her as a type that would not fight.
She don't.
That she was very naive.
She was.
You said that she's dependent on whoever she is with.
That's right.
That she would not be the leader in a relationship.
She would be.
Matter of fact, in your friendship, she kind of follows you.
She did.
And you said kind of after you left, Melissa had no friends.
Right.
On the stand, Wendy recalled the one and only time she spoke to Melissa's husband, Christopher. It was over the phone around Thanksgiving 1998.
And that you actually called to speak to Melissa on the phone.
I did.
And Chris answered the phone.
He did.
And he wouldn't let you speak to
He
her.
wouldn't.
And he was controlling her ability to talk to you.
He was.
And it's fair to say that at that call, he did not want Melissa to talk to one of her childhood
Objection.
It's true.
Now, during the trial, Melissa's mother, Norma, was the prosecution's star witness. But the first thing the defense questioned Norma about was her serial killer husband, Carl Patton.
Just generally speaking, were you involved with some of Mr. Patton's murders?
I helped him dispose of the bodies.
Okay, so you were involved?
Yes.
Okay.
The next question was Norma's role in his crimes.
Say who that is?
That is me.
Okay, well, you don't have to say it yet. I'm just asking.
No.
And
Yes.
you know, you will be able to say what the occasion was for that?
Yes.
And who was it in that photograph?
It was me.
And when was that?
In Fayette County when I testified against Carl.
So you were aware of several of the details of Carl Patton's murders?
Yes.
And for one of those murders, did he try to stage the crime scene to look like an accident?
Yes.
And did he have an accomplice who was his high school best friend?
Yes.
And did Carl at some point suspect that his accomplice was telling people about the murder?
Yes.
And at that point, did Carl decide to kill that person too?
Yes.
And did he also decide to kill that person's girlfriend?
Yes.
So it's true that Carl killed some of his victims just because he was afraid they were telling people
Yes.
that they knew too much.
Yes.
For some of his murders, was it true that Carl wrapped up the bodies in bags?
I do not know.
You testified, as I asked a while ago, that you overheard Carl making plans for one of the murders.
Yes.
Did those plans involve him killing people for money?
I would assume so, yes.
Insurance money?
Yes.
Was that the first time you had heard him talk about killing someone?
Yes.
And what did you think at that moment? Did you think, I should get out of this house?
No.
Did you think that was a red flag about your husband?
I loved my husband.
And you didn't go directly to the police when you overheard your husband discussing murdering somebody?
No, I did not.
You in fact helped Carl plan the killing of Joe and Liddy, didn't you?
Yes.
Where did he kill them at?
In our living room.
And were any of your daughters home when this happened?
No.
Didn't you testify in 2003 that Melissa was in her room?
I don't recall.
And did you help Carl dispose of those bodies that you killed in your house?
Yes.
How did you do that?
They were in sleeping bags, and we took them to where they were thrown into the water.
And if you had this much involvement with your husband, why weren't you prosecuted also?
I was given immunity for my testimony against him.
And you in fact asked for immunity, didn't you?
Well, yes.
So you ended up serving a year of probation, is that correct?
That's correct.
Carl died in prison last year, and despite the fact that Norma had testified against him to save herself, she and Carl remained married. All told, they were together for 56 years. Now, we're going to get to Carl Patton's crime spree in a bit, but for now, on the stand, Norma described a close relationship she had with her youngest daughter, Melissa. Up until Melissa met Christopher Wolfenbarger.
Melissa started seeing him when she got into high school.
Okay. And was this at the beginning of high school, middle, end of high school?
Freshman year.
All right. How did you come to find out about that relationship?
When she met him, she started running away to be with him.
And what about that instance? How did you find out about it?
Well, she would not come home from school, and I would try to find her and turn her in as a runaway when I wasn't able to find her.
Norma didn't approve of Christopher. From the beginning, she felt he had a meanness in his eyes. In fact, she actively tried keeping Melissa away from Christopher. Not long after Melissa started dating Christopher, she became pregnant.
I found out before Christmas that she was pregnant.
Okay, do you recall how old she was at that time?
No.
Was it at a point where she had just started high school and say she was a freshman?
Yes.
Melissa would also give birth to a son, Joey, less than a year later. According to Melissa's family, Christopher was abusive, something the prosecutor emphasized during the trial. How Christopher had a history of intimidating Melissa, how he coerced and controlled her, and allegedly he was physically abusive. In July of 1998, Melissa called the police to report an incident of abuse, and at that time was encouraged to file a protective order against her husband. After this physical altercation,
are you aware of why that arrest occurred?
Because he had knocked her down and dragged her along the sidewalk.
Okay. Now, I want to make sure that we're talking about information that you are getting from the right source. Where do you get that
from Melissa.
Okay. And when did she tell you that?
And when me and her dad came and picked her up from where they were living on Brookline Street.
Okay.
When we took her back to the house, and I saw the abrasions on her backside.
During the trial, a police officer who was dispatched to the scene testified that he responded to Melissa's domestic violence call, and in his report, documented bruising on her legs and abrasions on her arms.
The officer observes bruising and marks. Ms. Wolfenbarger, Melissa. After that, he directs her to go take out a protective order, get you some protection. And that's exactly what she did. She went down there in person and applied for a protective order. This is the day after that July incident, July 21st. So the next day, July 22nd, she goes to the courthouse and petitioner seeking relief from family violence from him. She was seeking relief from the choking that she had and her sister observed. It wasn't just what China said. It wasn't just what Marlon Sutton said about what he observed. There's another person who saw that abuse. Dorothy.
The prosecutor is referring to a neighbor who lived across the street from the Wolfenbarger family. She would testify that she frequently heard loud arguments coming from their home, and that one time she noticed a bruise under Melissa's eye. During the trial, it was revealed that Melissa had started dating a coworker named Thomas Dixon. They both worked together at the Waffle House restaurant in late 1998, and he would testify that he saw signs of physical abuse on Melissa.
Then we get to the end of 98, and she's still being abused because she's still going back and forth between Dixon and this defendant. She's still talking about the abuse. This is at the end of the year. Last time he sees her is in December. She's been whooped, intimidated, coerced, bruised, punched, dragged down the street the entire year of 98. And I submit to you that's not the first year it started. It didn't just start in 98. Even further, this has been going on for a while, not just 98.
In fact, Norma would say that she believed her daughter had been coerced into giving up custody of her children to Christopher's mother. Here she is describing the last time she spoke to Melissa.
My last conversation with her, she called me on Thanksgiving Day in 1998, told me that she was back with Chris, and she wanted to know what I cooked for Thanksgiving, all I cooked and who all was there. We were all sitting around the dining room table, and she wanted to come down, and she was going to ask his mother to bring her down there. And I said, you don't have to ask her. I'll come get you if you want to come. And anyway, the conversation went on a little bit longer, and my last words to her was, I love you, and you know where I am if you need me.
When Melissa didn't show up for Christmas, Norma started to worry. Number one, she wouldn't miss Christmas. And number two, Melissa had asked for a very special present from her mother that year. A picture of Melissa with her grandfather, who had recently passed away.
Did you ever get an opportunity to give Melissa that photograph?
No, I did not, because Christmas 1998, she didn't come. She didn't call.
Norma didn't call the police. She said she was encouraged not to file a missing persons report because her daughter was 21 years old, an adult who was fully capable of coming and going as she pleased. But when Norma's birthday passed in February with no word from her daughter, she made a trip out to Melissa's home in Atlanta, Georgia, and her worry grew because not only was Melissa not there, but neither were her children or Christopher. Even so, Melissa's mother wouldn't officially report her daughter missing until January of 2000, more than a year after that last call on Thanksgiving. On the stand, Norma described the delay in reporting her daughter missing was because she said she had a hard time getting her family to take Melissa's disappearance seriously. Another reason? She said she didn't want to drive to Atlanta on her own. But the thing is, Melissa's husband never reported her missing, and he didn't contact her family, saying that she disappeared, not only from his life, but of their children's lives as well, which wasn't usual for her. When police finally went to interview him, sometime in 2000, he told them that she'd left to start a new life in California. At the time, there wasn't any direct evidence of foul play, at least on the surface. 5 months after Melissa went missing, in April 1999, investigators found a severed head in a black trash bag across the street from a company called Action Glass. Several weeks later, other dismembered body parts were recovered nearby. At the time, the skull and the remains were identified as an unknown male. Melissa's husband, Christopher Wolfenbarger, worked at Action Glass. That is until February 1999. It was believed that Melissa went missing a couple of months before in December of 1998. But since no torso was ever recovered, a cause and time of death couldn't be identified. And because a positive identification of the remains couldn't be made, the severed head stayed at the medical examiner's office as an unidentified male, which was a misidentification. So no one connected the missing mother of two to the grisly find. But that was about to change in 2003, when Melissa's parents, Norma and Carl, got a knock on their door they hoped they'd never get. It wasn't about their daughter Melissa, but rather the missing young mother's father, Carl, was arrested for an unrelated murder. Carl Patton Jr. was arrested in 2003 because he was suspected in 4 murders that occurred in the 1970s. These homicides became collectively known as the Flint River murders because the first 2 of the 4 victims had been recovered in or around the Flint River. Ultimately, Carl Patton confessed to not only the 4 murders, but also a 5th that took place in another jurisdiction. Part of his MO was staging the murders as accidents, and some of the homicides were committed for insurance money. But at the time of his confession, Carl asked a favor of the lead detective, Bruce Jordan. This from WSB-TV.
He said, my daughter's been missing for years, and he said, I didn't kill her. Would you put the time into finding her that you did finding me? I said, well, I can try it.
True to his word, Detective Jordan checked multiple medical examiners' offices, looking for unidentified remains that could potentially be a match for Melissa. Now, remember that dismembered head that had been found near the glass business that had been identified as male? Well, when investigators saw how close these remains had been found to Melissa's home and her husband's workplace, they compared Melissa's dental records to the skull. And it was a match. Today, it's believed that Melissa was murdered sometime between December 10th, 1998 and April 1999. But because Melissa's skull and extremities were found weeks apart, it was impossible to determine the time and cause of death. However, the ME ruled the death as a homicide, considering the facts that the remains were dismembered and placed in plastic bags and hidden. After Melissa's remains were identified, Carl Patton was cleared of her death because his DNA didn't match forensic evidence which had been found on the plastic bags that had Melissa's remains inside. However, Melissa's husband, Christopher, remained a person of interest. The case stalled, though, because he wasn't talking, and there wasn't enough evidence to support a murder charge. For decades, Melissa's murder case remained cold, but an investigator was assigned to the case in 2021, 3 years before Christopher Wolfenbarger's arrest in 2024.
On May 25th, 2021, this case was assigned to veteran homicide detective Jay Shepard, and I will pass it over to him at this point.
Good morning. My name is Detective Jerry Shepard with the Homicide Unit. I'm currently assigned to our complex cold case unit within the Homicide Unit. This case was assigned to me. I was tasked with the job of going through the entire case file.
Apparently, in 2024, a tip came into a true crime podcast and was then passed along to the cold case detective working Melissa's case. And between the re-interviewing of witnesses and potential DNA advancements, the case was presented to a grand jury, which helped pave the way for an arrest and indictment of Christopher Wolfenbarger for Melissa's murder.
We identified the things that we needed to do, which was re-interviewing witnesses, following up on additional leads, and of course the new technology that comes into place. With that, I've gathered the facts, and I collaborated with the DA's office and was able to get the facts together to come up with the probable cause to arrest Christopher Wolfenbarger.
But during the trial, this potential DNA evidence the detective alluded to in the press conference wouldn't pan out. In fact, the prosecution suffered a major setback when the hair and DNA samples found in the black plastic bags, which contained Melissa's remains, indicated 5 contributors, none of which belonged to the defendant, Christopher Wolfenbarger. This was a huge blow to the prosecution's now entirely circumstantial case, the centerpiece of which was witness testimony of the couple's tumultuous relationship.
She was manipulated, she was intimidated, she was abused, and she was coerced to give up her children. I believe that's what the evidence shows.
The prosecutor made it clear in his closing arguments that Melissa's father, who, yes, he was a convicted serial killer, but had been cleared of his daughter's murder, and also that after her daughter went missing, Norma, Melissa's mother, went to the home that was owned by the Wolfenbarger family, where Melissa was living with her husband and children, looking for her daughter. Would she really do that if she and her husband had something to do with Melissa's murder?
No matter how much they want this case to be about Carl Patton, this case has nothing to do with Carl Patton, other than the fact that he asked law enforcement to find his daughter. Why does Norma go to the residence of Kathy Wolfenbarger looking for Melissa, raising attention to that issue they're responsible for?
The prosecution also focused on the fact that Melissa's remains were found less than a mile away from their home, and that her severed head had been found across the street from Christopher's former place of employment, and that he'd been suspected of taking a reciprocating saw from the business that he hadn't returned. This was the same kind of saw that was consistent with how Melissa's body had been dismembered.
The head was across the street from Action Glass, and we know that the extremities are virtually right next door to Action Glass in this wooded area.
And the coup de grace was a jab at his character. Would an innocent man hide behind a wine cabinet when the police came knocking at his door?
He knows exactly why the police are at the front of his house. Oh, shit. He's hiding for 30, 40 minutes. Come out! He's right here. There he is. Come on out, buddy. Gig is up. I don't know. 10, 15 minutes. It's the police. Go hide. Guilty.
Not surprisingly, the defense's closing argument was pretty much cut and dried. There was no direct physical evidence connecting Christopher to the murder of his wife, Melissa, and that the defense acknowledged domestic violence had occurred, but made sure to point out that that wasn't evidence that he killed his wife. And baked into the defense's case were Melissa's parents. Throughout the trial, the fact that Melissa's father, Carl Patton, was a serial killer, and that her mother took the stand acknowledging that she helped him dispose of some of his victims' bodies, and that was hard to overcome. And the family's history allowed the defense to point to Melissa's parents as potential suspects, and to question Norma's credibility as a key witness for the prosecution. The jury would deliberate for roughly 2 hours and returned a verdict last week on August 22nd.
Good afternoon, sir. My understanding is that the jury has reached a verdict?
Yes, the jury has reached a verdict.
Okay, and was that verdict unanimous?
Yes.
Okay. Will you please hand it to the deputy? Will the defendant please rise? In the Superior Court of Fulton County, State of Georgia, the State of Georgia versus Christopher Wolfenbarger, case number 24 SC 004201. Count 1, we the jury find the defendant not guilty. This 22nd day of August, 2025.
Up next, Criminal Mischief bonus content. Here, my co-host, Brandon Morgan, and I discuss the case in more detail. And check out our Criminal Mischief YouTube channel at EVO Creative. And as always, thanks for listening. From Pie in the Sky Media, Criminal Mischief is an EVO production, recorded live in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. We're produced by Brandon Morgan and myself, music by Soundstripe. For EVO Creative, I'm Carolyn Osorio, your writer and host.